All right, welcome to the Coach.Win podcast. I am joined by Mike Zani of Predictive Index today, so I'm really excited. I've been using, just to give a little background on me, I've been using the Predictive Index for 20 plus years as a client of Predictive Index, and now I'm actually a certified partner of Predictive Index, so it's exciting to have Mike on the tail. So why don't you do an introduction of your current life, Mike, and then we'll talk a few other things.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate you having me on Coach.Win. Looking forward to having this conversation about talent. My current role, I'm the CEO of the Predictive Index, which is a 69-year-old company founded in
Wow.
1955. Like you, I've used the Predictive Index as a client for a long time. I was introduced to it in 2006, but led the investment to take over the company from the founding family, the Daniels family, and sort of refounded the company with my business partner Daniel. We've purchased multiple companies, run them, and we've been doing this for 9 years, which is a lot longer than we normally do it. It's usually about a 5-year hold, but this company has so much potential that we've been at this for 9 years, and it's really our dream jobs, and we love it.
That's awesome. Tell us a little bit. A lot of our people that listen to our podcast are business owners, some of them very much serial entrepreneurs. Why don't you just jump through a few minutes of your journey?
John, I was a professional sailor, a coach for the '96 Olympics, and got into business sort of accidentally. An acquaintance of mine purchased my sailing school and my sailing curriculum, and he was doing the acquisition of Sunfish and Laser, which are two of the more popular small sailboats in the world. Although they were in their sort of 10th and 11th hours of life. So we were buying these old brands and sort of rolling up the small sailboat manufacturing. So I got really excited about business, went to Harvard Business School. I applied to 3 schools, got rejected from 2, was lucky enough to get into Harvard for some bizarro reason. And, like with luck like that, you should put more money on the dice table, I guess. But it's one of those things that I ran into this model called the search fund. And the search fund is buying used companies with other people's money. And that's what Daniel and I did. We bought a company in 04, made ourselves senior management, ran it from 04 to 09. We were snot-nosed managers when we started. We ran into the Predictive Index. We ended up buying 2 more companies and finally bought the Predictive Index. But it was at the first company when we realized they don't teach you about talent and leadership in a classic sense at Harvard Business School. We were unprepared that when we bought our first company, Ledco, law enforcement development company, 45 people, they were the wrong 45 people. They were the people that the old owners needed to run the old strategy, not what we needed to run the new strategy. So we had to completely turn around the talent pool of that business. And which is when we started really going on our own talent optimization journey. And we didn't know what we were doing when we started, but now we're sort of professionals in the space and thought leaders in the talent space. So it's great to have arrived here.
Yeah, I'm guessing some of your captain of a sailing, the right team members in the right places, understanding them made a big difference in sailing as well as business.
I do think one of my life lessons about these Olympic athletes are super talented, but often quirky. And in order to get the most out of your athletes as a coach, you had to modify yourself to their style. And sometimes it was hard. It wasn't natural for you to do that. But I think that makes a great manager too. Managers modify themselves to get the most out of their people. So I didn't know it at the time, but back as a 26-year-old, coach for the U.S. Olympic sailing team, I was learning these lessons about how to be a good manager as a coach, teaching these high-end athletes. It was pretty exciting, actually.
That's awesome. Well, ours with Coach.Win, we're coaching a lot of teams, the executive teams, and the things that tend to come up when we do our quarterly surveys is kind of 3 key items. And that's where I want you to talk about your experience with Predictive Index and some of the stuff you do around. One is around communication, just like communication up and down. And I think there's 2 parts to it. One is literally the transactional part of communication, but also like there's different ways to communicate to different people. right? There's not everyone's necessarily the same. And then accountability and then performance of teams. Those are the things that come up: communication, accountability, performing, and performance of teams. So let's just start with communication. Tell me again, I know you were attracted like me to the predictive index. Tell me about like how that has helped communication, what you guys talk about when it comes to PI and that communication inside a company.
It was funny. The first time I took the behavioral assessment, I was at my very first Vistage meeting. So 36-year-old manager. I walk in here, blazer tie, trying to put my best foot forward with these peer group of CEOs. I was probably the youngest CEO in the room. And the Vistage chair says to a stranger across the way, he says, "Hey, Dan, introduce Mike Zani." And I was like, well, how's Dan going to introduce me? He doesn't know me. I didn't realize it, but I took the pencil and paper behavioral assessment. It was in the packet of
Yeah.
stuff that I filled out. And Dan, who is a pretty good PI practitioner, uh, he reads back my behavioral assessment. I was like, did this guy call my mom? Like, how did he know all this stuff about me? And
Yeah.
and afterward, I walked up to my chair and I said, "What was that magic trick that guy just did?" And he says, "Hey, a bunch of us use the predictive index. It's a great behavioral assessment." And my wife was an MBTI master practitioner, so I was like, already I already was accepting of behavioral psychometric tools. So that's when I adopted it. But I realized when I got trained in PI, I used to call it decoding the human. It's like someone gave me the decoder ring for people. And I was like, wow, it's really powerful knowing all of this stuff about, say, a John. Like, if you were my new boss, I'm like, I want to know what makes John tick, because I want to get out of you whatever I can get out of you, either as a mentor leader or as a pathway to my next gig or job. We need to be successful together. So this whole concept of using tools to help you decode other people so you can understand how they think, how they tick, how they like to make decisions. It's just hugely powerful. And I think some leaders go on this journey naturally and some fight it.
Yeah.
But it's like this literally free data on how people think and motivate. It makes me a better parent. My youngest is an individualist. My wife is so frustrated by his behavioral style, and I just manage him like the book tells me to manage an individualist, and it works perfectly. We have a fantastic relationship, and I'm using the decoder ring still.
Yeah, we have some similar backgrounds on that. My wife is also MBTI, and my son is actually a Maverick, so I get to deal with him quite a way. So,
The joys
uh,
and frustrations. Yeah.
yes, it's all good, but it's lit as a decoder ring. You do understand, and you're a little more patient with, and you think a little bit. I find when I do that. So I like what you said there. Communication, like even like, hey, I'd like to know what my boss's decoder ring is, so I can communicate in that way. And that's same obviously with direct reports or peers when it comes to communication, to make it a better communication style across all people in the company.
Yeah, I often espouse, managing up, down, and across all differently. You manage differently to the person, but you also manage differently. When you're managing down, you have authority. When you manage across, you have to influence with influence. And when you're managing up, it's different tools depending on the relationship you build. But you have to be very careful on how you manage up. And I think people who are successful at really managing up well get a lot out of that relationship, and can actually uh, win. Like, if companies and leaders aren't sure how to deploy assets, capital, investment, you can win more than not. Your projects get picked because you're managing up really effectively, and you can have a huge impact on a company by just managing up really well.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Let's switch a little bit to accountability. So, how have you used a predictive index to help with accountability when it comes to both individual or a team about just how to make it so there's a better conversation around accountability and people getting projects done or succeeding at work?
It's interesting. I heard this. This is thought leader on accountability, Eric Coryell, and he's like, you can't hold people accountable. They can only hold themselves accountable. And while I don't think that's 100% truth, I think there's a lot of truth in that. So what it, if people really have no ability to hold themselves accountable to what they promised they would do or say they would do, that's easy, right? You don't work with them very long. But it's trying to find out what are the motivations for people so that they can do things that they desire to do. And like take your son, the Maverick, and for the audience who doesn't know PI, Mavericks, super high dominance. They want to put their thumbprint on everything, very strategic, low attention to detail. Like there's a couple ways to hold them accountable. One, they buy into the big idea and they're like, they'll do it. Or you can manage them with if-then statements. You go, if you do this, I will let you do that. And they're like, I'll do anything to do that. Like
Yeah,
I will
my son.
literally, yeah, like literally, I'll give you 5 quarts of blood if needed if I get to do that. So, I think if you understand someone's behavioral motivations and you understand what makes them tick, like if you use that same trick of a maverick to someone who has a different profile, like a guardian, it won't motivate them at all. It'll be quite the opposite. It'll be demotivating. So I really find that people have to hold themselves accountable. You're trying to figure out what are the levers that I can pull in terms of, you know, whether it's motivation or communication or styles, so that they feel really bought into why they're doing it and they understand the commitment that they're making to the larger organization, the group, the team, or even me. I think if you're consistently forcing someone to meet their accountability uh, promises that they've made, that's easy. Life's too short to work with individuals who don't deliver, and you move on. And it's you wouldn't take this. If you were on a pro football team, if someone drops 9 out of 10 passes, you're not going to pass the ball to him anymore.
Right.
You're like, all right, move on. Next receiver, please. Same in business. It just takes longer to get there.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I realized that I was struggling with early in my career, and we pick, packed, and shipped things in the distribution situation, is I was very proud of the fact that we were growing super fast. We were, in a technology into cell phone accessories, super fun, high energy. And so all my ads were placed to come join our high energy. And everything in that wording this was before I was PI, everything in that wording was trying to attract me. And all my warehouse was turning over like crazy because they weren't very accurate in shipping. They weren't very accurate at whatever. And I had trouble holding them accountable to be accurate. Well, the problem is they were all low detail, high pace, not wanting to do the exact same thing for 4 or 8 hours a day. And until the PI, by hiring the right fit for the role, we're a stable, friendly work family environment in an air conditioned warehouse. We started to write the ads. So, I mean, the whole idea of, first of all, if you get the person who just naturally in that fit, it's just naturally easier to hold them accountable. So if you had experienced like just how in the hiring process, hiring to fit makes it doesn't mean for everyone, but it makes accountability a little easier when it comes to getting the right person in the first place.
We actually developed using natural language processing, which is a form of AI. Using natural language processing, we analyze your job ad and let you know if it's a good fit for the position that you're looking for. So if you are looking for, let's call it, typically a warehouse staff will be specialists, artisans, guardians, high attention to detail, high patience, repetitive tasks sort of roles. Shockingly to no one. They might not use that language, but we do. So if you take a bubbly, effervescent HR administrator, and they're writing these beautiful job descriptions, trying to be like, oh, our company has, like you said, energy and great culture and fun and you're like that's you gotta speak to the person. So we analyze, you're looking for the wrong type. That a job ad should be like, Do you like process? Do you like perfection? Do you like making sure that you have operational proficiency? And these people are like, yeah, I would look at the same ad and go, "Bleh."
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it has this selection, you know, intentional selection bias that you attract the people who would be good fits behaviorally. It actually polarizing to the people who would be bad fits, and it tunes the way you write that ad, and it is predictable. And it's amazing that we've actually done this for people. You're like, you're looking for exactly the wrong person. You're using the wrong language.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about teams now and performance. So when we do our coaching, obviously we come up with OKRs. What some people call them rocks, priorities, goals for the year. A team gets assigned, whether it's an executive sponsor plus 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other people on a team. And sometimes those do really well. They knock it out of the park and not that. How can the assessment start helping understand based on, is it a radical pivot strategy or is it a, hey, just let's get 1% better, 2% better, like improve process slightly strategy? How have you seen these tools kind of develop from like 20 year ago PI to now to help with really when it comes to teams?
Yeah, John, this is not a short answer. Shameless
All
plug.
right.
That's why I wrote the book, The
Okay.
Science of
Yeah.
Dream Teams, Wall
Yeah.
Street Journal
There you go.
bestseller. So it's like you get into it, deep into it if you wanted to. But you know, teams are mystical, and some of them are super high performing and some of them are completely dysfunctional. We've all been part of both,
Yeah.
fortunately or unfortunately. So I think when you look to uh, formulating teams, and there are certain industries which do this a lot. Management consulting is one of my favorite to pick on. You take a high-end management consulting company like McKinsey, Bain, Boston Consulting Group, and the others, and they constantly assemble and reassemble teams. A partner lands a project, they recruit, some managers and associates to come on the team, and they constantly assemble and reassemble teams. And they usually do it ad hoc. It's like, oh, I've worked with so and so before. I liked working with them. If they're available, I'll pick them. If they're not available, you move on. I think it's when you're doing this, when you're designing teams, it's what is the work that needs to be done. You have to build your team. Like if the project is, you know, super fast pace, lots of uncertainty, you're breaking new ground is very different than if you're assembling a team for your logistics warehouse dilemma. So I think it really starts with, do you know what work needs to be done? And I think a lot of people go, yeah, of course I know the work that needs to be done. You go, okay, so assemble the team accordingly. Do you need a homogenous team of all the same players? Sometimes that's what you see in sales organizations.
Yes.
It's it's a literally it's a pen of people who all have the same styles, because it's a very narrow job, versus there are other jobs that need diversity. You need a heterogeneous team to bring things to bear. So I think once you understand the work that needs to be done and whether you need a homogeneous or heterogeneous team, you can really be scientific about selecting your teams using behavioral science, as well as there are some other things that have nothing to do with behavioral science to performance of teams, and this is about these teams holding themselves accountable as a team and processing real issues together.
Hmm.
Instead of me going to you, John, you're the boss, or maybe you're just a peer of mine. I'm like, you know, Chris over there is a waste of space. And you go, yeah, maybe is he? I don't know. Is it? And then all of a sudden you and I, it's called pairing. You and I pair, talk about Chris, and totally erode the team. Like
Yeah.
you're like, if we work this issue, you're like, Chris, you've been late on the last 3 deliveries. You're killing us. And someone else goes, yeah, Chris, you are. Like, process it together. That's what really high end teams do. If you look at a timeout for a national basketball team, a lot of timeouts, the starters, whoever's on the floor, they put their arms around each other and they're like, how do we defend against these 5? They don't need the coach. They
Right.
don't need an analyst. They're just like, I'm guarding LeBron James and I can't do it by myself. Who is going to help me?
Yeah.
Because, and And they talk about like, that stuff. It's not like I'm bad. You're like, no, that's LeBron James on the other side. No one can guard him by himself. So it's especially in his prime. So the question is, like, if you process these issues together, and there's none of it, there's all the stuff that makes good stuff, Lencioni stuff,
Yep.
trust, so we can actually, it's not like, John, you're getting killed by LeBron. It's like, I don't think you're bad. I'm like, no, duh. How
Yeah.
about whenever LeBron goes to the left, I've got your back. And when he goes
Right.
to the right, Bob over there has got your back. And you're like, okay, that's a strategy. The same is true in work, where really good teams process that stuff real time together. And there's no, you don't like me, you think I suck. There's none of that. It's just like we're trying to get the work done.
I love that. I love your thing too about the huddle and then the asking for help. Like, hey, it's okay if you have LeBron James or you have some project that you don't have a lot of experience on, or you ran into a roadblock. I love it when teams ask for help, because that's how we get through things, right? It's the people that be quiet and try to just do it themselves. Like, ask for help. That's what the team's about. That's what we're
And then the
trying to
teams
accomplish.
collectively, if you've got multiple things rolling up, and if a team waits 4 weeks to tell you the bad news, and you're like, wow, 4 weeks ago we could have helped you. Now we're in trouble. And
Yeah.
a lot of teams are afraid, and you're like, hey, we're not getting it all done. You
Right.
wanted it all done, and we're not getting it all done. And again, we're not bad people. It's just, you got to know. And I think that is the super high performing teams.
Yeah.
They understand the work to be done. They assemble the team so they're balanced for that work, and the team members really process the issues together.
Yep. So true. Oh, that's great. One other thing that I loved your statement too about, Harvard and about talent. And I was at Wisconsin, just undergrad business school. But again, yeah, not a lot of talent, and definitely nothing on how to have direct reports and do like one-on-ones, like how to literally be good at this event. And that's, leading, managing, holding people accountable is critical for managers. But often they have not come up in a situation. And I think maybe the world's changed from when my grandfather was VP of Honeywell and people were going through 3 years of management training before they got made manager. Most people that we work with was like, hey, congratulations, you're now manager. So how can tools like yourselves start helping in that realm? And then to tie it all together, Dan, I want to talk a little bit about how AI is starting to affect your business as well. So what's out there for the one-on-one, that lead, manage, hold people accountable
Well,
world?
I think you brought up something really sage. I think, in the days of Honeywell and IBM, that we invested in management, and it was really practical. And it was even before that, we had, and Germany still does this, they have this, mentor mentee, culture. I think in the United States, too impatient, jobs change too much. You people either feel they can't afford or they don't. But the way someone gets to become a manager of people usually looks like this. They manage some process or project reasonably well, and someone says, hey, you did a nice job. We're actually we're going to give you some resources. And they're like, what's that? And you're like, people. And you're like, oh, okay. Oh, okay. So they give you a person, maybe it's even part-time. You're not even you're not even their boss. You just get
Right.
loaned them. But then if you keep doing good work, they give you more. So all of a sudden, you had no clue. 6 months later, you've got 5 people reporting to you, or 2 people, and you're like, I have no idea how to do this. So you want to do a good job. And what you end up doing is go, who is my best manager? Oh, you go, John Lund was my best manager. And you go, I'm gonna copy all the things that John used to do. And so you basically parrot your favorite manager. Well, the only reason John was probably my favorite manager was because his style matched mine. And so all I'm doing is self-reinforcing my own preferences.
Yeah.
So I do think we undertrain people in all sorts of best practices. All they do is do exactly what comes naturally. Who's my best manager? Parrot them, mimic them. And they may pick some things up. They go, oh, that was a good tool. I'll try that. They might ask a question, but no formal training. So what there is there's really a void of best practices. And We actually just made an investment in, we acquired a company that specializes in one-to-one meetings. And it's amazing. This company has incredible virality in companies that one-on-ones, everyone has them. Most of them are average, some good, some are bad, but no one trains you on how to run a great one-to-one. And this software actually does a great job of pulling you without you wanting to fight towards best practices.
Yeah.
It helps you share agendas early. It has recurring templates that you can use. It reminds both parties that the meeting's coming up and they should work on their agendas, or the other person did an agenda. It lets you take notes by these agenda items and set action items or recurrences. It allows you to give people feedback and tie it to corporate goals. It's all built in. So you don't need training on it. It's like the way most kids learn today. They pick up their phone, you download an app on your phone, you give it 30 seconds. If you understand it and it adds value to your life, you keep using it. If it doesn't, it becomes a dead app. So if good software does this, it's like, oh, this is making me better. Let's just say I started using the software and you and I had a one-on-one. You go, Mike, what is that? This is great. I should use this. So then you start using it. It helps L&D departments, learning and development departments, HR departments broadly. They don't call them that in smaller companies, but it helps them build better managers by sharing them best practices and giving them tools to run their meetings better in very simple ways. Agendas, taking notes, action items, giving feedback, tying it to corporate goals. Ta-da!
That's I'm looking forward to learning more about that. I know it's a recent investment by you guys, so just learning as a partner about that investment. How is AI affecting all of your? We talk a lot about it. My partner Rob and I were really excited about what AI is possible. We have every gamut of our clients, from it's not going to be that big a thing to they're already excited and saving 25% of their time and creating 40% better outputs in certain departments in their companies. What's AI been doing for you as a business owner and leader?
Well, this is a scary question to answer because it's going to get a timestamp. What I know now is, 1/100th of what I need to know about this topic. But I think it's important for us to all start talking about it to expand our own belief sets on things. I think what the most current AI models are doing really well is predicting what's going to come next with high accuracy. So you build these into language models. I think the way that we've started using this is we can actually point. I'll go back to this one-on-one meeting software. Let's just say you and I you're my boss, and we have a weekly. And there are 2 or 3 different either Slack channels or channels on Teams that we frequent. Maybe our job is project management. There are a couple project management channels. We actually have the AI scrape these channels and suggest agenda items for you and I to talk about. And
wow.
This is amazing. You do this and it gives you, here are 10 things that I think you and John should talk about based on where we pointed it. We said, these are the channels that John and I frequent. And 50% of them are bull. You're like, we don't need to talk about that. But 50% of them, you're like, we should talk about that. Or interestingly, we just talked about that. We're done with that. But it helps you build the agenda. And it almost always grabs something that you would have forgotten. You're like, oh, we should talk about that. So you can have AI scrape these channels and tell you what you should talk about. And you're like, why is the machine better at me at that than I am? It's because machines are diligent. They do it. They do it at high repetition. They don't care if they're right or wrong, really. They show you what they show you, and you get to choose. That's not important. This is important. I shared with you already the natural language processing, talking about job ad appropriateness. But I think it's going to go beyond that. Let's just say, John, if you were going to give me feedback, now I'm your direct report. I was supposed to be a high performer, but maybe I've got some issues I really need to work on. You got to give me some tough feedback. What if you're writing the feedback and it looks at your writing and says, would you like to rewrite that in a way that Mike would like to accept it? And you're like, what? And you're
Yeah,
like,
no kidding.
no, Mike's a different style than you. Write what you need to say. We're going to help you rewrite it in a language that Mike will appreciate. And you're like, would you like to do that? And you're like, yeah, I mean, this is a tough conversation. Why wouldn't I want to write it in a way that will be received better by the audience? And you're going, oh, that's interesting. Or maybe you really stink at giving feedback and you need help. And you go, Mike is, I'll use some words. Mike is lazy. Mike has low attention to detail. Mike is easily distracted by bright, shiny things. And you go, and all of a sudden and it says, would you like me to help you write some feedback based on these early inputs? And you're like, please, I just need some material to get started. AI can do that. And all of a sudden you go, that's not right, but that's right. And now all of a sudden we get your juices flowing and it makes it easier for you to do something that's hard. Give direct negative feedback. And if you don't do it, I'm going to keep being a problem child. I mean, how many times do you as a coach have to encourage your people to have tough conversations?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. We get to encourage it all the time, and that'd be an amazing help for it. I mean, I love both those. I love thinking back to my career in my company. You know, I had a head of sales, a head of marketing, a head of ops, a head of warehouse, head of finance, and HR, right? And the one-on-ones, while I did them, I kind of ran the same agenda for most of them versus if and we didn't have Team or Slack back then. But now if I could have pulled like what have they been working on in the marketing channel, like what's been going on, and I could have me come in more ready for that one-on-one in a very quick way because I'm impatient. I would have wanted it pretty quick. That really helped with my agenda. So I totally get that one, and definitely get not just writing in my style, writing to the style people can hear. So that's really great. Well, this is some really good information. I know it does because I'm a big believer in predictive index, you know, for communication, accountability, team performance. And I'm glad that you were available to be on our cast to be able to share with our business owners and other groups. I appreciate everything you guys are doing. I love your investment in your new deal to help with one-on-ones because that was another one that comes up consistently. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your company. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to be on our podcast today.
John, thank you. I want to thank you on behalf of all the coaches for, you know, making better leaders out there. We need coaches to invest because we collectively as business leaders aren't investing enough in our people, in our talent, and coaches do it. It's almost like in the aftermarket. You come in and you do it and you bring your expertise. So thank you for the invite, but thank you also for what you do to make leaders and managers and businesses better day to day.
I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, John. You as well.
Thank you.